You're listening to the uMentor Talk Show, now available on the Umoja app. I'm your host, Imran Dharamsi, and on this weekly talk show, we invite professionals and teenagers to take us through their journeys and give us advice. And remember, if you have any questions for the panelists, you can always leave them in the live comments in YouTube, and we will get to them during the show. And before we start, we wanted to mention a bit about the Inspire platform. This platform is a question and answer platform for career advice in our Shia community. So, as a rising professional, you can ask for great advice from professionals in our community. And as a mentor, you can give advice to our community's future professionals, as well as students who are younger than you. That is available via the Umoja app on Android and iOS. And one quick note before we begin, we are able to share stories of inspiring professionals, students, and community organizations only because of the generous support of viewers and listeners like you. So please consider supporting the uMentor Talk Show at umojaoutreach.org/donate or through the Umoja app. Every little bit goes a long way in opening career doors for our youth and connecting our communities. Thank you very much for your support. Today's speaker is Hidaya Nawee. She is a speaker, writer, and activist whose work predominantly focuses on issues of race, gender, religion, and disability advocacy. Her work has the overarching theme of God-centered social justice. And in terms of her professional and educational front, after spending 2 years pursuing pre-medical studies at Montgomery College, Hidaya decided that she no longer wanted to pursue medicine and became a pharmacy technician. Now she is an aspiring attorney and is working through the transfer process to finish her undergraduate degree. So I know that was a long intro, but let's bring in Sister Hidaya. Assalamu alaikum, Sister Hidaya. Thank you so much for joining
Wa
us.
alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah. Thank you for having me. That was such a glowing introduction. Thank you.
Yes. So I know, I just gave that introduction, but if you could please, in your own words, introduce yourself and talk about some of your work in terms of activism and I guess where that comes from, and also your current educational path.
Yeah. So, salam alaikum, everybody. I'm so excited about this. Hopefully, it's of benefit to the viewers and listeners. My name is Hidaya Nawee. I am a writer, a speaker, and an activist, even though I'm kind of, in a lot of circles, reluctant to use that term. But yeah, so writer, speaker, activist whose work focuses, as Imran says, on God centricity, right? Because I think activism is one of those spaces where it's very easy to just kind of forget about God and do what we want. And, my definition of activism is anything that is God-centric, no matter how small, that you can sustain in order to benefit yourself, your community, and also globally as well, right? So yeah, I started out pre-med because, I'm an immigrant child and that's what we do. And like very quickly I was like, okay, this is not it. And so after that, people were like, oh, what about pharmacy? And I was like, okay, right. So I got a job in a pharmacy and hated that too, right? Because pharmacy is doctor light, essentially. Sorry to all the pharmacists out there, but essentially, like, it's the same thing, just different, slightly. So didn't like that either. But throughout all of this, the one thing that I always knew I wanted to do was work that focused on social justice and activism. And so it was kind of natural that I would gravitate towards being an attorney. And in the last, I want to say like over 10 years, since way before I finished high school, I knew I wanted to be an attorney. And this whole journey has been a journey of coming back to that. But yeah, I think, in terms of activism, someone I was talking to recently, a friend of mine, summed it up best. He said, my whole job is to try to get people to care. Which is true, right? We often do not see things outside of our own points of reference. And I am a woman, I am Black, I am, Muslim, Shia, I wear hijab. And on top of that, like I have a disability, and obviously you can find people who fit into one of those categories, two of those categories, three of those categories. But you know, even in my own life, it's very hard to find someone who fits all of those things at the same time. And so whatever space that I am in, it becomes a thing of how can I use my privilege in this space to make people aware of things that they're not aware of, right? Like if you're super rich, you probably don't know that there are people in your community who are starving, right? And if that doesn't affect you, like you don't have a reason to care, right? Until someone kind of puts it in your face. And a lot of times I seem to be that someone. So, yeah.
Okay. I want to definitely go into like your education in the second half, but for the first half, I want to focus on your activism work. And I find it really interesting that you mentioned you try to keep the activism that you know engage in God-centric. So could you talk for a few minutes about why is that so important, and how do you keep up that intention to make it about God and not about yourself? I know
I
it's a
want to
big
highlight,
question, but
yeah, it is. I want to
yeah.
highlight first of all that it's very hard to do, right?
Okay.
Let's just get that kind of out of the way. I'll give you an example. I obviously I'm not going to say where, but I was contacted to do something with some people, right? And
Okay.
immediately I was like, I don't want to do this, right? No, absolutely not. And the question is why, right? Nobody asked me this question. I was asking myself this question, why? And the answer was the person in charge of this, let's just say their values and mine do not mesh at all. And
Okay.
so my instinctual response was to say no. But I had to rethink that because it was like, okay, I am saying no mostly because I don't like this person, right? Which is not enough of a reason. And what if I'm meant to go on and talk and about this and change their mind or one person's mind who's listening, right? So, and actually, like a lot of people were like, really? Like, you're doing this? Really? You know, and it was surprising, right? But I had to come to the point where I was like, I'm going to do this because out of everybody in the world, I was called to do this, and there's a reason for that. And I can't just say no to things because I don't, you know, I don't like people or I don't agree with them. And I think it's important to sit in spaces where you disagree with people because that's how you grow. So I did do it, but yeah, it's extremely difficult to consistently renew your intention where this is concerned. But it's an everyday practice, and for me, it comes down to like how can I constantly focus on this, right? How can I constantly bring the imam into everything that I do so that anyone who wants to, you know, call me to do something, I first and foremost am like, okay, how does this further, you know, my growth goals in terms of my spirituality? That's the number one question, right? And if my goal is service, then it cannot be I want my name on this just because I want my name on it, right? It has to be this is what I do, the tiny, tiny, tiny thing that I do in order to serve the imam. That has to be number one for me at any point. And so, yeah, it's extremely difficult to do, and it's a daily practice for me. And I'll say, like, sometimes you get it wrong. I'm not perfect by any means. Sometimes I do get it wrong, but when you do get it wrong, it's about coming back to yourself and to God in this way.
So this is something that we had talked about in the pre-interview, but we said like at least what I've noticed from what you were talking about is like your power in raising awareness about issues comes from people trusting that you're not going to like you're not doing it because it's about you. You're doing it because it's about the issues. So maybe if you want to speak to that a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to sound really weird to say, but a lot of times when people ask me questions and I give answers, they're like, well, you're saying this because of this privilege that you enjoy in the community, right? Or for instance, like when I talk about anti-Blackness in our communities, people are like, well, we love you, right? Like, what are you talking about? We can't be racist. You know, look at all of these platforms that you are on and all of these things that you're doing. And the thing is, it's not about how people treat me. It's never going to be about how people treat me. Yes, alhamdulillah rabbil alameen, I'm extremely privileged. If what we're comparing it to is other Black women in our communities, if that's what we're comparing, yeah, I'm usually the most privileged Black woman in the space. But it's not about me. It's not about how you treat me because you know that I'm on this platform or that I'm related to this person or that person. It's about how do you treat a Black woman, for example, who walks into your space that you do not know, right? The goal is to treat everyone like you treat me, to love everyone like you love me, right? So yeah, a lot of people make it about me. I'm like, no, this is not. And also I want to say, like, it's not personal, right? Because a lot of people also take this very, very personally when you talk about certain things. If I say, you know, as a Muslim community, we need to do better with anti-Blackness, people are like, oh my God, she called the entire Shia world racist. And oh my God, you know, and that's not what I'm trying to do. That's not what I'm saying. Yes, some communities have come an extremely long way, and it's important to celebrate that. But we also cannot get complacent, right? If you have one Black friend, that's not progress. You know, like, I mean, it is, but it's no reason to get complacent, right? And also, like, using your one Black friend as the reason you're not racist is racist. You know, yes. Like, so yeah, it's not, it's honestly, and I say this sincerely, it's never about me. I'm not talking about how people treat me necessarily, unless we're talking about when I walk into spaces where people do not know who I am, right? Because that's happened too. I don't pretend to like, oh, I know the entire Shia world. And so, you know, anywhere I walk in, I enjoy these kinds of privilege. That's not true at all. There are a lot of, you know, there are a lot more people who have no idea who I am than there are people who do know who I am. And so if I walk into randomly into a Shia center anywhere on earth, what is that going to look like, right? And if it's not, the example that I give is like, we talk about how much we love everyone and we all sing Kumbaya in the Muslim community. If Bilal walked into your center right now and you did not know who he was, how would you treat him? Right? Because that's what we say, like the Prophet loved Bilal and Bilal was Black, right? Yeah. So whatever, like we can't be racist because that's the sunnah we're following, right? But if Bilal was to walk into your center today, how would you treat him? And if you cannot enthusiastically and categorically say that he's not going to experience any kind of discrimination or racism, then we have work to do, right?
Yeah. I want to touch more on that point, actually. Like, what are some of the overarching themes of your activism? You touched on them, I know, but if you could maybe elaborate for a few minutes on that, because I find that very fascinating, that you care about so many issues and that all like stem from your position.
Yeah. I mean, as I alluded to, obviously, like I care about anti-Blackness in our communities. I care about poverty eradication in our communities. That's a huge one because I'm around a lot of extremely privileged people, financially speaking. And so it's very easy for them to think like, oh, I'm financially privileged, so everyone must be financially privileged. And that's not the case at all. I'm passionate about mental health and access and resource and destigmatization of that. I see a lot of it in our Muslim community, and there is there should be no room for it at all, right? Because if we're going to say Islam is a holistic way of life, then we have to live that. We have to get to the point where we're not calling anyone who's seeking help, crazy, or any of those other kinds of terminologies that we use. But yeah, I think that those two things are, we often either like don't think about them, or when we do, it's like, oh, it's never gonna affect me, right? I'm never gonna be poor. I'm a neurosurgeon, right? Like, I'm never, going to be poor. I have 16 PhDs, right? So, but it can happen to you, right? And even if it doesn't, like, the whole point of Islam is, I should say a major point of Islam. I don't like to put Islam in one category and say Islam is all this or all that, but a major component of Islam is community, right? The Imam that we're waiting for, one of the things that he's going to establish is community, right? It's why we have hadiths that say things like, you'll be able to, like, reach into your brother's pocket and pick out what you want and put the wallet back, right? It's why we say, like, by the way, like, try that now, like, not even with, not even with me, like someone you don't know. I want you to try it with, like, your mom or your brother or your father. Like, we can't do that, right? We're not even to that point yet in our own family, a lot of the times, much less like in a global community, right? So this is extremely important. And so if we are saying that we are waiting for an imam, this is what active intidhar, active waiting, is going to have to look like. We need to lay the groundwork for that right now. And also, like, mental health is a huge thing in our communities, right? Because, I mean, living in the West is extremely stressful. 9 to 5 is extremely stressful. Being a student is extremely stressful, right? And exhausting. And so if someone is saying, like, I want to go seek help, then we should facilitate that. And it's part of why I'm such a huge advocate for people doing very different things with their lives, because it takes all kinds, right? As you can see, like, I'm not the greatest interior decorator. Everything is white. I don't know.
We were talking about that. Me neither.
Right? Like, I have no idea. So we need people who have this talent. And yeah, and also, like, I'm one of those people that believes everyone should be in therapy, regardless of whether you're happy or unhappy. I see it as, if you're unhappy, you need to be in therapy in order to ensure that you have help in fixing that. But if you're very happy, you need to go to therapy to figure out how to stay that way. So yeah, we should all be in therapy.
I wanna, because you just brought up a really important point, which is that like, it's so valuable to have people who have different skill sets in our community. And of course there's value to lawyer, doctor, engineer, but aside from that, we need everyone. We need all sorts of people. So can you talk about, like, your educational journey specifically? Because I know you were in pre-med, and then you decided that it wasn't for you. So can you talk about, like, that process of switching?
Yeah, I mean, pre-med is something that was, I want to say, like, decided for me, right? It was never, it was, I had and still do have an immense respect for medicine, but I never really thought that it was for me. And this is something I want to touch on too, because as young people, especially, we aren't taught to kind of follow what you're passionate about and do that, right? And I think it comes from the fact that a lot of our parents come here from other countries. And why do they come here? They come here for a better life, right? And so better life in our terminologies looks like getting a job that is going to be able to sustain you and your family. And a lot of times the jobs that they're kind of trying to push us into, they're high paying jobs, right? And so it was like, okay, doctor. Like we need a doctor in the family. A doctor is very, well paid. I would dispute that point, but that's another talk show. But yeah, there's this idea that, doctors make a lot of money, and it's a very like prestigious thing to be in the community. And so it was kind of like,
and how about like pushing against that must have been really, really difficult.
It was. Yeah, it was. And I'm trying to talk about this without like throwing my entire family under the bus. But yeah, pushing against it was extremely difficult. But it came down to, I have a vision for what I think my life should look like. And I believe in using whatever talents we have to best serve the imam, right? Whatever talent you have, whatever comes to you naturally, that's probably where you should be, right? In terms of service, right? And so for me, it was social justice. It was, caring about this and trying to become an attorney. It was never medicine. Not that that's bad, right? But yeah, it was an extremely difficult decision to make, because I had to come to terms with the fact that people are not always going to be able to see the vision that you have for your life. And, it's extremely difficult because sometimes that's your family that you're talking about, right? Your family doesn't see it. And in no way am I suggesting like, don't listen to your parents and your family members. That's not what I'm saying at all. But I'm saying that at a certain point, like, I felt extremely strongly that this was what I was meant to be doing. And the fact that no one else could see that, first of all, I personally think that it was born of the fear of like, what if I don't make, enough money, or what if I don't get a job, and this is a really saturated field, and all of that. But yeah, I had to be okay with that and trust that even if they don't see my vision now, inshallah, when everything is said and done, like, you'll see why I chose this instead of that.
That's a really nuanced message, and it's of course it's one that often comes up in this show. Another piece of that, I think, is that not everybody has that perfect linear path, like go to school, get a job. And so I think, and it's obviously not just you, it's many people who come on this show. But I want to ask you specifically, in between those starts and stops and changing your path and deciding what you wanted to pursue, how do you muster that courage to start again? And like, I guess, keep pursuing becoming an attorney despite all the obstacles.
Yeah. Full transparency, that was hard too. Right?
Yeah, of course.
that was hard too. I think one of the things is, alhamdulillah rabbil alameen, like, I have an amazing support system, right? I have always been very lucky in terms of like, my friends are extremely supportive. People that I've talked to, people that have met me, have been extremely supportive in terms of like, if you need this, I'm happy to help. And now I have an incredible applications advisor who's extremely helpful and patient and kind. And so I highly recommend getting an advisor and a support system, because it's extremely difficult to be able to do this on my own. And also, it was important because I needed, in terms of my applications advisor, I didn't even know I needed this until I actually started doing it. I needed someone who didn't know anything about how traumatic this has been for me, right? And so when I ask a question, this person doesn't have this kind of like, oh, you've been trying to do this for 10 years. And everything that comes with that, right? So their answers to my questions are not from that perspective. And because I am, it's extremely helpful to have someone who's able to get me out of my own head and say like, okay, why do you want to do this, right? Outside of like, yes, okay, you've been trying to do this for 10 years, but like, why? and it's not coming from a place of like, okay, maybe you're not meant for this or anything like that. But yeah, having a great support system, a great accountability partner. If you do not have one, please find one, okay? Because it makes your job so much easier. And also like just having frank conversations with the people who don't necessarily see your vision is also extremely important, right? I had to tell my family members and all of these people who are saying like become a doctor, I'm like, look, I'm disabled, right? Like and my disability is not subtle, you know, I have a physical disability. I physically, like if I had an immense passion for medicine, I would do it, right? But because I don't, at least not in the way that they want me to, and that coupled with the disability that I have, it's not worth it, right? I even considered like maybe I can find like a PharmD JD program and do both at the same time. And no, you know, that's a lot to do for something I already know. Like if I do have a PharmD JD, I'm not going to use the PharmD. So what's the point of, you know, trying to, So yeah, get an accountability partner if you do not have one. Surround yourself with people who are able to see the vision. If it's at the point where people can talk to your family and say, well, look, like just trust this, even if you can't see it, then yeah, it's important to get those people to speak on your behalf whenever possible. But yeah.
Yeah. Okay. That's some really good advice, I think. So unfortunately we're almost out of time, but I want to squeeze in two last questions. And one of them, the first one is, you're like one of the first transfer students or like to be transfer students that we've had on the show. So could you shed some light on the transfer application process? Maybe, you know, your biggest tips or a rough outline of how the process is or who it's for.
Yeah,
It's up to you, whatever you think will be, you know,
yeah.
useful.
I mean, I think that it's important to say that I'm still learning the process myself.
Sure.
This
Yeah.
is why I'm saying it's so important to find someone who knows more than me on this and is able to help me in all of this. But the biggest thing that I'll say is that if you are freaking out about something, you're probably thinking too hard about it. So it's important to get out of your own head. I remember even yesterday I was talking to someone and I was like, yeah, one of the Common App questions is, how did you overcome an obstacle in your life? And I don't know what to write. And the person laughed at me. Because if you know anything about my journey in the last about 10 years or so, like it's all been one giant obstacle, right? It's about which episode of the soap opera am I going to write about today. So yeah, like really just relax, right? Relax. If you do have an accountability partner, talk to them. Ensure that they are able to give you honest feedback, and just, you know, like my biggest obstacle right now, like I just mentioned, is like the personal statements. I've also had an incredible time getting like my school to respond to certain things and get them to other schools. So yeah, just the accountability partner, honestly, someone who is kind and patient. Yeah, that's
okay. Yeah, I agree. That is really important. Like going through the application process.
Yeah.
So this went by really quickly, but what is your final piece of advice for our listeners? Though if they, let's say they take away nothing else from this interview, which I hope they take away much more than nothing else, but what is the one thing that you would want them to walk away with?
The one thing that I will say is that a lot of you guys are young and trying to pick and, you know, figure out where exactly you want to go with your life. I will say that continue or start, if you haven't, to keep the imam as a central part of everything that you do. Because at the end of the day, like we're waiting for him, and a huge part of waiting is ensuring that we set the stage and the groundwork for the work that he's going to come do. that's the one thing I will say. And also, if you haven't already, find your small thing that you can do sustainably to better yourself and your community and the world.
Okay, that's amazing. Thank you so much again for joining us and for all your amazing advice.
Thank you for having
Yeah,
me.
of course.
This went by really
Okay,
fast, but
it did. I was
yeah,
surprised.
yeah.
Honestly, it's like, yeah. All right. Thank you. Um,
Thank
and thank you everyone for tuning in to the uMentor Talk Show. Tune into the show next week, Saturday at 3 p.m. For another interview. And just one more time, if you enjoyed the show today, please consider supporting us at umojaoutreach.org/donate or through the Umoja app. Again, every little bit goes a long way. Thank you so much for that. Remember, you can always catch our previous episodes not only on YouTube as video replays, but also as podcasts on SoundCloud, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. Umoja Outreach Foundation, uniting and empowering the Shia community.